Hi, it's another episode of Thrive's Community Conversations, or whatever name we're going to continue to evolve to be for this podcast. This is where we talk to members who are doing interesting, exciting, and impactful work in our community. Today, we have Linsey Grove from the Hypatia Collaborative here to chat with us about public health, nonprofits, and public office.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Right?
That was a
Welcome.
really good succession. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You do all the stuff.
Too much. No. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk about Hypatia and the work that we do. I think being diagnosed with ADHD really informs a lot of why there's a lot of stuff going on in my life, but I'm always happy to talk about it. So, yeah.
Hey, listen, I've known you for a long time, and I've always, as I told you earlier, I've always gotten the through line of everything that you do. It makes perfect sense to me. And I do want to start with a comment and then kind of lead into Hypatia.
Sure.
I remember when I moved back to St. Pete after being gone for a long time.
Yeah.
And sat in an event that was for Grow Smarter.
Oh,
remember
my
way back then?
Gosh, yeah, that feels like ages ago.
It was ages ago.
Yeah.
And the consultant came out and said that racial disparities are a public health issue.
Yes.
And this was really the first time I had thought about that and really kind of drawing the parallels of when you have inequities in a community, you will not ever have health.
Yep.
So we've always thought, in the general populace, think public health means shots and doctor's appointments, not things like food security, knowing where you're going to sleep tonight. So tell us a little bit about how you got into your public health journey and how that led you to Hypatia.
Sure. Well, I will tell you that when I originally went to college in Michigan, fire up chips. I went to Central Michigan University. I originally went to school to be an art teacher, which is probably very weird. But if you know me, I'm kind of quirky, so maybe art education wasn't that big of a leap, but
ergo the art teacher vibe that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. So when you grow up in a really rural community, there's like 5 jobs that you know of, right? There's, teacher, police officer, nurse, farmer, And for me, I'd always really admired all of my teachers growing up. So I definitely knew that I was going to go into education. And then when I got to Central, I started working at the volunteer center on campus. And they, for whatever reason, decided that I should run the Safer Sex Patrol program. And that was a program where you handed out condoms at tailgating events and in residence halls and bars.
Brilliant. I mean, that's pretty forward thinking for a public university, right?
We, of course, had to talk about abstinence as well. But I know. But it was very comprehensive. So when I started doing that, I started to think, this is really fun. I really enjoy talking to people. Because sex is very stigmatized and taboo, people want to talk about it, right? And I want to help people make better decisions. And so that really felt natural and really a pathway that I wanted to go down. But I had no idea what public health was. So I volunteered at an HIV testing clinic on campus, and there was another woman there who was also a student. And I said, what's your major in? And she said, I'm in public health. And I thought, what is that? She's like, it's all about health education. And, I intern at the health department. And I thought, that's what I want to do.
Oh, I love this so much. So you went from art to
yes.
all because you were assigned to hand out a jillion condoms at a tailgate event. Awesome.
Yeah. And I got very lucky that my university had a bachelor's in public health because many at the time did not. And we had a family studies and human sexuality concentration. So I was able to pursue my interest in doing sex education. So by the time I graduated, and I had never thought about grad school, but by that point I was like, I'm definitely going to grad school. I knew that in order to do the kind of work that I wanted to do, I had to get an advanced degree. So, and that's what brought me to St. Pete, was to go to USF and get my master's. Yes, go Bulls. So,
and then later your PhD as well.
Yep. I later on got my doctorate.
Dr. Linsey Grove. Yeah. I should have introduced you as Dr. Linsey Grove.
Totally fine. Totally fine. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. And, I was also able to work at USF. I worked both at the College of Nursing for a while, and then I also worked at the USF St. Pete campus, which I absolutely love. Working with students was always just something that I really enjoyed. And just the feeling of being on campus is so wonderful because everyone is there because they're pursuing something that they believe in. So, but it's funny now, I think about it's such a full circle thing, right? Originally, I went to school to be an educator, and then I really thought that I was going way off track. My family certainly thought I was. My parents were like, I don't know what you're doing, but, I guess we'll support you. And, then I ended up teaching. So that was just really, really cool. I was actually able to use some of the things I'd learned in my earlier, bachelor's when I was pursuing education.
That's great.
As an instructor, yeah.
So coming full circle, and then I know early on when you came to St. Pete, you were really you bought a house in Roser Park.
Yeah.
And really leaned into some of the equity issues that our city has struggled with, continues to struggle with.
Yeah.
What was kind of the inception of really getting involved in some of those issues? And talk a little bit about, as you've been doing the public health side, also how you've been addressing some of the disparities that we have.
Sure, that's a great question. So when, going through a public health program, at least when I was going through the program, it's a little bit different now in the state of Florida.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. We talk about health disparities a lot. And to your point earlier, a lot of it is centered around health outcomes. But, now we're starting to embrace the concept of the social determinants of health, right? That there are things out that aren't directly health related that impact our health outcomes, like physical infrastructure, access to health care, if you're housed, those kinds of things, right? And to me, what was one of the more powerful one of the things that was really powerful about determining the quality of those social determinants was policy. So I really wanted to get involved with the League of Women Voters. Initially, when I was trying to find them, I got to the women's club, which is over on Snell Isle, and I was like, I don't think this is the right one because they just knit hats for babies. But then I finally, figured out, it's the League of Women Voters. And I got involved with them in 2017, right after the Women's March, which was huge. They actually had a really great deal going on that if you joined because of the Women's March, I think your membership was $21. So I'm not going to lie, I'm a sucker for a good deal. I'm a Midwesterner. I can't help it. But
whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, right? And coming from the space of public health and reproductive health, we had a very active reproductive rights team. And so if you don't know Amy Weintraub, she is one of the most, fierce advocates of reproductive health in our community and probably in the state of Florida. We were very lucky to have her lead our reproductive health team at the League. And she literally messaged me on Facebook and said, hey, you want to meet for coffee? I saw you signed up, to be a part of the League, and this is something you're interested in. I want to get to know you. And that was kind of the beginning of that. And as I got more involved in the League, learned how to be a better advocate, learned how to talk to legislators, it really inspired me to do more, especially around racial justice issues. We see that a lot in reproductive health, right? We've got a lot of health disparities between, women of color and white women when it comes to birth outcomes, when it comes to even just access to good reproductive health care.
Was this something that was top of mind when you were going through your master's program or even your undergraduate, was about racial disparities in health outcomes? Was that a topic, or was that really something that came up later as you started doing more advocacy work?
Yeah, it was honestly something that came up a lot during school, but to actually be in the community and see it, and in school they talk about building partnerships and coalition building, but really, like, that's the kind of stuff you kind of have to learn hands-on, right? And a lot of that I learned through the league, and I think that those experiences really impacted me in that I was like, oh my God, like you can see in our community, right? Living in the city of St. Pete, you can see how segregated our city is.
Right.
You can see the health outcomes, right? And when I started becoming more involved in the leadership of the league, it really started to become very apparent to me that there was a lot more that we as an organization could do to address overall racial justice, because that racial equity is embedded in the work that we do no matter what issue we're working on.
Interesting.
So the more I got involved doing just sort of grassroots organizing and really building coalitions with, community stakeholders like Miss Gwen Reese or, Terry Lipsy Scott, it really dawned on me like, oh my gosh, there's a lot more work that the league could do in terms of being a better partner to folks that are doing racial justice work. And so when I became president in 2019, my big focus was trying to really shift our league into embedding the principles of DEI into every aspect of the work that we did. When I first started, there was always a conversation around, well, how do we diversify our membership? Like, the league traditionally is usually older white women.
Right. And,
there's always this like, well, maybe we, do membership drives, blah, blah, blah. And really reflecting on that, I kept thinking, what are the things that bring people to the league, right? I think about my own experience. My reason for joining the league was its incredible work, with organizing the Women's March, and then, of course, all of the work that it does in terms of reproductive health and voter outreach. But, when I started talking to people in the Black and Brown community, I tried to be very candid with them. Like, what are some reasons why you wouldn't join the league? And over it was, well, you guys don't really focus on stuff that we're interested in, or sometimes we don't feel welcome in your space. And for me, I was like, you know what? We already do a lot of things really well, but this is the thing that I would like to focus on, is making the league a better partner rather than a lead in many of these areas, and also finding ways to, again, embed DEI practices into what we do, whether it's in our sustainability team, hey, we definitely care about the environment, but let's talk about environmental justice.
Right.
We have environmental justice issues happening in our community. You think about Childs Park and the, air quality there. You think about folks that are, in areas that flood, that are predominantly, BIPOC populated. There's all of those things that they touch every single issue that the league works on. And that was something that I really wanted to make sure that would be a part of my legacy, at least as president. And of course, my presidency coincided with COVID.
Oh, my goodness.
Which was also, in a way, I think such a transformative experience for me as a public health practitioner, also leading an organization that was trying to do voter outreach. So we invested in PPE for our volunteers. We were at Black Lives Matter protests trying to register people to vote. We were attending, county commission meetings to make sure that, mask mandates were still in place, and that that our elected officials were making decisions that were in the best interest of public health. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's very difficult in the state of Florida, but we are very lucky to live in a community that is very engaged.
So let's talk about
Yeah.
that for a second.
Sure.
Living in a community that's really engaged.
Mhm.
I'm fascinated by the changes that have happened in this city.
Yes.
And you've been in St. Petersburg now for what, about 12, 13, 14 years?
This will be year 16.
16 years. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
16 years.
Mhm.
16 years ago, the city was so
Completely different.
very different.
Yep.
And it's always been a bit of a progressive city,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of going back to those racial disparities, it's always been a very segregated
Yes.
city.
Mhm.
And you've been on sort of the front lines of gentrification to some extent of what's happening. But it's interesting to think about how our city has changed and the impacts that that's had on sort of all of these things that you do. So not only public health, but also environmental issues, also the racial disparities, economic disparities, but then also leading into the nonprofit work that you
Yeah.
do. And I do want to segue into that
Sure.
because you probably know better than anybody what is happening with our nonprofits, what the state of our nonprofits is right now.
Sure.
And I don't know about you, but I will go out in friends' boats. Always have friends
Sure.
with boats. That's what you do
Yes,
in St. Pete.
of course,
FWB,
of
friends
course.
with boats.
Yeah.
And you go and turn and look at the skyline of St. Petersburg and how different it is
Yep.
from 16 years ago, and the vast amount of wealth that has moved into this city. And yet, my sense, but corroborate this, my sense is that our nonprofits, our not-for-profits, are the people who are boots on the ground are woefully underfunded.
Yes.
In a city with
100%.
so much wealth.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that. So
Sure.
what is going on? Why is that? And how is the money that the government diverted to that eventually ended up with Hypatia
Sure.
Collaborative that is going to nonprofits. Talk to us a little bit about how that looks, how things are changing, and what the future looks like.
Sure. So, I don't think that it is a surprise to anyone that, the nonprofit sector has always kind of been, a patchwork quilt of, a lot of different organizations in various, I think, stages of struggle, right?
Here now, or here always, or everywhere always?
I think always. And maybe
Yeah.
part of the overall conversation really is about being more honest about that, right? So, when I came into the nonprofit space, a lot of what I did was grant writing. So when I left USF, the College of Nursing, I decided to go out on my own and start consulting. And I knew that, one of the things that a lot of nonprofits need is grant writers. And so I was a decent writer, and I decided that I was going to, offer my services that way. And I did that for a while. And as you grant write for a nonprofit, you kind of get to see sort of behind the curtain, right? They have to provide you with information about their financials. You have to ask them questions like, hey, we're applying for this amount of money. How do you want to use it? Oh, do you actually have the capacity to administer these dollars?
Right.
So there, a lot of that, it turns into very honest conversations about sort of the pain points that nonprofits are going through. And
also probably how much local support there is, how many
Yes.
local donors
Yep.
there are. And
Yes.
and what was kind of the biggest surprise to you there? Was it that so many of these nonprofits were heavily reliant on grants, or that money was coming from outside the community, or that maybe you were pleasantly surprised that a lot of it was coming from inside the community?
I think it's a couple of things. One, I think it was in 2018, the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete did a study of all of the nonprofits in Pinellas County, and 80% of them have $10,000 or less in either assets or cash. 80%, right?
Of the nonprofits in St. Petersburg?
In Pinellas County. So you think about that, right? At that time, there were 1,800 registered nonprofits in Pinellas County that were headquartered here, right? So this is just straight IRS data. what that tells me is that there are obviously a lot of grassroots, also just kitchen table nonprofits. It's like a mom that was impacted by, something tragic or something happening in her community and said, you know what, I want to do something about this and I'm going to start a nonprofit. You also have a mix of other people that are like, they started a scholarship fund, in memory of someone.
Right.
So what that tells me is that there is a huge disparity between those who have a very small budget versus, those who are your United Ways, your Operation PARs, right? And that's not to say that either of those size nonprofits aren't doing incredible work, because they are. And many of them are doing it without any resources, So that was one thing. The other thing that really stuck out to me was we are to your point, a resource-rich and access-poor community.
So what does that mean?
It means a lot of different things. For nonprofits, what that means is, to your point, we have a lot of wealth and resources here, but what we don't have is access to those things, right? Many of the folks that, let's say own vacation homes here, right? They may not be as invested in our community as the folks that live here full time, right? We also don't have the same kind of, I would say, ecosystem of philanthropy that's like been here a long time.
Right.
We do have a few philanthropic entities that have big endowments, but they're limited, right? They have donor advised funds, and donors are the ones that, again, the point of that is donors get to decide what is done with that money.
Can we pause right there? Because I want to pontificate for a second about a culture of giving.
Yeah.
I was in Atlanta a couple of years ago and was listening to people who are church-based, usually public health, caring, talking about what happens when someone moves to Atlanta. And if you are a person of moderate means and up, you move in and the question is, what group are you going to align with? How are you going to donate? Who are you going to be? That is just part of the cultural expectation of coming into that community.
Yeah.
And it's just ingrained in everything that's done there. And it's so, in some ways, heartbreaking to me to see so many people who come to St. Petersburg and you hear 9 out of 10 of them. Why did they come here? Oh, community. We were attracted by the community. And yet there is not that same culture of giving back.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know this much more than I do. Just from a grassroots, like, hey, casual polling of all the people moving into my neighborhood. Yeah. Oh, where'd you move from? Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois. Yeah. Oh, what organizations do you donate to? And almost always they say, oh, well, I still kind of just it's the people back home.
Yeah.
The people back home. Even if they are not even they don't even own property there. It's just, I wouldn't know where to start. I don't know where to start here. I don't know where to give here.
Yeah.
So it seems there's a lot of that going on, right?
100%.
In addition to paraphrasing what you said, I think there are a lot of well-meaning, kind-hearted, generous people here who have some sort of personal event and say, I need to start a nonprofit. Yes. So, we have 28 Save the Sea Turtle nonprofits, all kind of going towards the same mission, which then ultimately what happens, you dilute volunteers, you dilute funds, you dilute support. So life gets a little harder for everyone. So I am going to shift a little bit around because one of I want to ask you this question, and I want to talk a little bit about Thrive.
Sure.
But I love the fact that the word collaborative is in the name of your organization, Hypatia Collaborative. Yep. And the reason I love that is because I know your sort of express mission of your organization, but it also seems like you are so well positioned to have that top-down view of all these different organizations that are kind of sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about how you've been able to make resource allocation a little bit more efficient for some of those people.
Yeah.
And also how you and Hypatia and some of these funds have helped them be able to be more focused on their mission and less on the mechanics of running an organization.
Sure. Thank you for the segue. I do want to say that, you'd asked where, the funding came for our current project with the city of St. Pete. And it was actually American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So that was the second round of federal funding for COVID. So this is really COVID relief money. And it's really meant to, again, like in that package, there is obviously money that's meant to help nonprofits because we know that nonprofits were also really impacted like everyone else by COVID. Right. So, and to kind of go back to my desire to really work on equity, to me, providing support to small and grassroots nonprofits is a philanthropic equity issue, right?
Exactly.
Because to your point, we have a lot of nonprofits that have, multi-million-dollar budgets that they can use to better market what they do, do better donor engagement, host events, essentially make themselves more visible to donors that do have means to help support them. And they have entire departments to write grants, to do fundraising.
Right.
Whereas, your mom and pop folks don't have that. And so our goal was to try and level the playing field a little bit. My co-founder and I, Beatrice Farrell, had been working together. She and I met actually while I was league president because we were trying to do more voter outreach in areas that had low voter turnout, which part of that was in the Deuces. And at that time, she was the executive director. And so
we love Beatrice.
I know. Love her to the moon and back. And we both kind of were like, hey, there's a lot of nonprofits here in the Deuces area that really could just use a grant writer or, somebody to just help them with fundraising strategy. And traditionally, philanthropy has treated capacity building as, well, we'll put on a workshop and you can learn how to grant write. And while that's really good, it also kind of fails to see that most of these small nonprofits don't have enough time to actually do that work, right? Executive directors are wearing 10 hats. And putting on this workshop and paying a consultant to teach somebody how to grant write, it's not adding any hours into their day. And you're also expecting that person to become an expert on grant writing. That's why we pay people, So we said, what if we just actually diverted those funds into paying local small businesses and consultants to support the same nonprofits in our backyard with direct service? I mean, we still have professional development as a part of our offering, but what if they had access to a team of people that could really help them truly build capacity in their organization? And that was our pitch to the Welch administration. And they said, hey, this actually sounds great. And we want to do a 3-year pilot. So we're actually in year 3 of our 3-year pilot.
Amazing. Like, yeah. I want to just put a point on this because when we think about those federal funds, right, and recovery, in so many different ways that money was used, probably some beneficial, some not. But when I think of the way you've been able to pay professionals, say I'm a marketing professional, I'm a graphic designer, I'm a writer, who those people were out of work during COVID. And as you know, along with the resulting economic dips that happened, you had nonprofits that were struggling because they didn't have the funding that they needed. So you've been able to put money in the pockets of for-profit professionals who are then providing their services for free to smaller nonprofits who would otherwise not be able to afford those services.
Right. Yeah.
And I imagine the intention is to ultimately create ongoing professional relationships that will carry on far long after ARPA money is done. So, I mean, what an amazing and beautiful full circle and impactful way to win. for our community. And then, like you've said, the nonprofits get to do their mission work.
Exactly.
And we're creating wealth and allowing people to stay here who may not otherwise be able to stay in our city. So I love it that we have an administration and a government that sees that vision and understands the importance of that. So sorry to to take the words out of your mouth, but it's just such a beautiful story and an amazing impact for our community.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit. Do you have a success story of one of your nonprofits and how this program has helped them?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I love to say it's hard to narrow it down, but, we have multiple success stories. One of the ones that I absolutely love because it seems like such a, it's not exactly what you would think a success story would look like, but we have a karate dojo here called St. Pete Fight Team. They are amazing. It's a husband and wife, and all they really want to do is provide karate and leadership development for young people, right? So they work with kids of most ages, I believe, and both of them, I mean, they do this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're really trying to provide these services at very low cost or no cost to specifically kids in South St. Pete. So
awesome.
They were one of our they are one of our clients. And, in order for them to provide after school and summer programming, they actually needed to have cameras put on their property because in order for them to access, like, let's say, funds from the Juvenile Welfare Board or United Way also has funding for summer programs, they have to meet certain standards for safety.
Gotcha.
So what we were able to do, we have a wonderful IT guy. His name is Joe Hall. And he loves working with nonprofits. He's a veteran, and he has worked with nonprofits for like over 20 years. He's awesome. So he went to their space and basically, did an assessment, and then went out, found used cameras at very low cost, helped them set all of that up, helped them get their internet correct, really helped them get up to the standard that they needed to get to in order to do summer programming. And then we had one of our grant writers work with them to get access to United Way funding. So they now have a summer camp for kids.
Oh, that's amazing.
And they can do a lot more programming, and they have the money to be able to pay more staff, to do, to provide more scholarships for kids. And I hope for them, pay themselves in order for, them to pay their own bills.
And they have actually paid staff now?
Yes.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yep. And
how many kids do they serve?
Oh,
roughly?
My gosh. I'm going to say anywhere between 50 to 60 kids. And it's probably more now because they've started this, it's like Best Summer Camp, I think is what it's called. They're on Instagram. They've also been killing it with social media. But they were able also to access somebody to help them with core messaging and putting together a marketing plan for them. So again, all of these things that seem really innocuous. And I do want to point out that sometimes I hear in the community people say, I don't like to support nonprofits who have, I want all my money or my donations to go towards programming. I don't want to support operations or overhead.
Nobody, it's not sexy to say,
not sexy.
I'm going to pay for your electricity bill.
Right.
Nobody wants that. They want impact.
Yeah, but at the same time, think about, again, these, yes, are very unsexy things, getting cameras to make sure kids are safe.
Right.
But now they can do even more programming for our kids. And that, to me, is such a win. And it's if you can fund sort of the core needs of an organization, that goes a long way to increasing programming to meet the scale of the need in our community. And that's really one of our core values is saying, hey, we don't expect businesses to operate with, a 15% overhead, right? But we expect our nonprofits to.
Right.
And that's honestly really crazy to me.
That's bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not realistic.
No. And nonprofits are a part of our economy, right?
They are.
People are paid, salaries go back into the economy. If our nonprofit professionals and staff aren't paid living wages, that impacts the entire economy.
Exactly.
And we're starting to see that with the amount of federal funding cuts towards a lot of our, nonprofit and public sector programs and staff.
And state cuts as well.
Unfortunately, it feels like Florida's a little bit of the canary in the coal mine. We've been dealing with this for a while, and now it's just been compounded by what's happening at the federal level.
Well, so what does the future look like? Let's put our heads together here. Because one of the things I jokingly told people about, what is your vision for Thrive? Why do you do this? I have a very, very simple answer for that.
Okay.
My goal is to connect people with money to people who need money. And right? And that means a lot of different things.
Yeah.
That means, how do I create a space where Pinellas Community Foundation, who's one of our members, is here and maybe happens to cross paths with a venture capital investor, and they start talking and make a connection? Or how is it that how could I create a situation where an SEO specialist is crossing paths with an accountant who needs some website help, right? So it's big, it's little, but it's also, how do we connect the people who were doing things in St. Petersburg with the new people who are here, so that they feel connected. This is something I care about. I see you. I know you. I want to give you money now because I'm sort of intimately here. And it's I don't know the right answer.
Sure.
I look at these huge condos and I feel like these are very insular communities in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to tap into that to connect the people coming into our city with what's going on here, and with your story, and with Pinellas Community Foundation and all the other amazing organizations, the Center for Health Equity and the Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete. And to kind of flip that switch to say, the city that you came to because you love is only going to stay a city that you love if our whole city is also getting better as a result of this wealth and this growth, right? Because if half of our city is getting a shittier outcome, then that's not going to be sustainable growth for anybody.
Exactly.
And so how can we do that? How can Thrive, as a sort of community convening space, create opportunities to create more of those connections between the communities that your nonprofits serve, and also your nonprofits, and also your professional providers, and also ultimately the donors to the organizations that are funding all of this? I know that's like, that's the, $10 million question there.
I was just going to say, I'm like, maybe I don't want to tell you because then everyone's going to steal my idea. No, I'm just kidding. I think that that is a tough question. It's something that I grapple with as a business owner and as a political candidate, right? How do we create a better connected city? Because to your point, people who move here do move here for community, but I think sometimes our definitions of community and what it takes to really create and maintain the kind of community we want,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and it differs wildly between, what people think a community should be and what it takes to, again, maintain it. So, one of the things that I think makes St. Pete extremely unique and is also an invaluable asset to us is our neighborhood network.
Yes.
People are very passionate about the neighborhood that they live in.
You are?
I'm extreme. Yes, I love telling people that I'm from Roser Park, mostly because people are like, oh, you're in that weird place that has hills,
right?
Because everywhere else is flat. And for a lot of people who are interested in being more civically engaged, your neighborhood association is your first stop, right? To me, they are a pipeline for civic leadership, really. Many people who end up running for office started with their neighborhood association, right? That's not to say that being a part of your neighborhood association is easy, because, of course, it means there's usually a lot of personality management. Not everybody gets along. But that's the thing, though, about community, is that we have to recognize that community building requires time, patience, grace, and consensus building. And all of those things are not easy. Many of us do not have those skills. Many of us don't know where to start in building those skills, right? So I think that leveraging our network of neighborhoods is a great place to start, whether that's,
I love this.
hosting neighborhood association meetings here, or even having Kona here. I would also say too that, I worry about the epidemic of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I do think this ties back into neighborhoods, but I think about, how that has had a ripple effect on our ability to talk to each other about politics, about the direction we think the city should go in, and also just creating networks of solidarity when things like ICE come to communities, right?
Right.
And, I think sometimes the powers that be benefit from having people who are isolated. And if people are saying that their value is, hey, to me, the amenity of St. Peter's community, then they are already primed to want to become a part of that community. It just really depends on what that looks like for them. And maybe it is, joining the shuffleboard club,
Mm-hmm.
or going to, girl bosses on Friday. There's a lot of different ways that people decide to be engaged, but to even what you had said earlier about being a connector, it's also about connecting those organizations together too. And I think it really comes back to, we have a lot of people that do very similar work, but there's 5 different organizations that all focus on sea turtles, right?
Right.
And that's not to say that I'm not saying that there's too many nonprofits. What I will say is that I think that there are better ways to be engaged in the things that you're passionate about. It doesn't mean that you have to start a nonprofit.
Amen.
You can be a board member. You can be a volunteer. You could even start a program and have that be under another nonprofit, right? Because, again, one of the things that we run into a lot is that people start nonprofits because they're passionate. But starting a nonprofit means there's a management component. No one starts a nonprofit because they're excited about filing a 990.
Right.
So one of the things that we've actually really started to do with folks that come to us saying that they want to start a 501c3 is that we kind of put them through a boot camp. We say,
I love this.
Yes, and Beatrice has been the one that's been spearheading this, basically saying, okay, we'll help you, but here is all the things you have to do. And not just one time, every year, every quarter. Also, here are some other alternatives that maybe you should consider, because there's also, I think, a desire to want to be the person, right? Or start my legacy as XYZ. And it's like, I actually think about, there was a woman who spent her whole life, she was very kind of like, everybody kind of described her as being really mousy, right? And she was a league member. But she was a volunteer. She never served on leadership board, but she volunteered. She made sure that, she was registering people to vote, and saved her money her entire life and then donated it to the league when she passed away. And that is one of our sort of, financial reserves that helps the league stay financially solvent, and also is kind of a backup, right? And I think about that and I'm like, she didn't start another organization. Right. She didn't serve on leadership. She didn't run for office. All she did was say, you know what? This is the thing I know I can do. This is the thing I'm good at. These are the things that other people are good at, and this is how I want to support them, right?
Fantastic.
I don't have to be the main character in this space. And that's actually something, too, that I talked a lot about in the league. There are other organizations that do other things really well. All they need from us is just support. We don't have to sit at the head of the table. We can just sit at the table with them. And it actually takes a lot of pressure off of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it takes a lot of pressure off of organizations like the league to feel like they have to be spearheading everything. And that's just not even logistically or even capacity-wise possible for most organizations. And I think that's why you end up with burnout. That's why I think you end up with, again, competition for resources. So we're trying to create a space for people to have these more honest conversations about what is the highest and best use of your time, treasure, and talent, right? Because otherwise we're creating just an oversaturated environment where people don't know where to go if they want to, donate. There's so many organizations, they have no idea where to, how to choose. And how can we look at each other as collaborators rather than competition, right? If everybody's competing for the same resources because there's 11 of us, I mean, it makes it really hard to have these conversations about like, well, you guys actually work with, third to fifth graders, and we do, 7th to 9th graders. Actually, what we should be doing is working together under one umbrella, because we can actually reach a lot more people. And even funders are looking at that and really saying pretty bluntly, we're not going to fund you if you're not collaborating with other people.
I love that this has been the direction that nonprofits have been going.
Same.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So as you were talking, I had a brilliant idea.
Okay.
I love it that these things happen in real time.
Yeah.
So, I'm talking about Atlanta and that culture of giving. So, and you were talking about Thrive and loneliness, and actually Thrive is a great place for people who are new to town, who work from home, who don't have that sort of built-in community. What if we had a nonprofit fair at Thrive and invited anybody and everybody to come in, and they can shop for what resonates with them, right?
I love that.
So, somebody may like, oh, I should start a sea turtle, save the sea turtles. Nobody's ever thought of that. Well, actually, here, let's engage you.
Oh my God. Let me tell you about everyone that's doing it. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
No, I love that. I mean, in fact, that was something that we've really been thinking about as like our sort of end of project event, where it's like, we just want to celebrate all we have 66 nonprofits as a part of our project and 41 small businesses.
Yes.
So how can we celebrate this project that we did together, all of the nonprofits and the incredible work that they do, maybe attract board members, people.
Let's do it.
Yes, I love it. I was
all right,
like,
let's get it.
Nonprofit con, whatever
let's
we want to call it.
Let's get it on the books.
I love that.
All right, let's get it on the books before, and I'm going to segue now, before you get into high gear on your campaign. So I love it that all of this work that you have done in your life, education, and then public health and nonprofit, equity, women's rights, communities that have been overlooked, has now sort of come full circle to our District 6 City Council seat, which includes where you live.
Yep.
And
includes Thrive.
Yep. And what a huge and rapidly changing district it is. Probably the most important district in our rapidly changing city.
Yes.
So say a few words about what you see as the opportunities for this district and where you really want to put your talents for focus into the next generation, sort of this next era of St. Petersburg that we're entering.
Ooh, that's going to be tough to narrow that down.
Sorry.
So, no. I agree with you. I think District 6 is one of the most important districts in our city, and it is one of the most diverse, which I think is, to me, one of my biggest priorities is ensuring that all of the voices of District 6 are heard on council, because, I think that having a very vibrant and changing downtown really sometimes can sort of drown out some of the voices in other parts of District 6. We also have parts of the St. Pete CRA in District 6. Actually, a good chunk of them are in District 6. Campbell Park, 13th Street Heights, Roser Park, Bartlett Park, these are all a part of the CRA. And even the MLK Business District, they're working really hard to transform the southern part of the MLK Business District right as we speak. And so for me, I want to make sure that all parts of the district are, have access to the same opportunities. We have an amazing opportunity with the St. Pete CRA. A report came out last year, so it's been 10 years since the CRA was formed in 2015. And so a local nonprofit called Policy Partners did a 10-year sort of check-in to see where things were based on the original plan of trying to address blight and inequities in the CRA. And because of the incredible transformation that the city has seen, we it's okay. No, we actually have gone from an estimated or a projected amount of $7 million in the CRA to $70 million.
Whoa!
Because of property values going up, and a very much changing CRA in general, right? We're seeing demographic shifts in the CRA, and certainly, there is a lot more there's a lot more financial resources in the CRA to really do some amazing things, including, recently the city put out an RFP to do more workforce development in the CRA. But you think about the cries for affordable housing,
Right.
Updating and, creating space for small businesses in the CRA. So we really have an amazing opportunity. The other great thing is that money can't be touched by the state. So with all the talks around property tax elimination, this is a little bit of to me, this is a bright spot because the state cannot touch those CRA dollars, and those dollars can really be better used to really, I would say, accelerate community development, accelerate affordable housing, and really think about the types of affordable housing, the types of support systems that our small businesses need to really transform the CRA in a way that hopefully will have just generational impacts, right? And that's really the reason why the CRA was created in the first place. So I'm very excited about that.
So that's got to be so hard as a person who's representing such an incredibly diverse district.
Yeah.
And diverse racially,
yes,
income,
yeah,
age, education. I mean, just in probably every way you can have a diverse representation. And in many ways very extreme, right?
Yeah.
Extremely wealthy and affluent and extremely
yes,
poor.
Yes.
So how does a person navigate that as a representative to meet the needs and advocate for all of those groups of people in such a diverse district? This is why you're running for public office and not me. I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that.
Well, I would say that, all of my different experiences, whether it was working at USF St. Pete, whether it was with the League of Women Voters, whether it's working with a variety of nonprofits, my experience as a small business owner, I think all of those inform my ability to work with different parts of our community. And I live in South St. Pete. I'm always happy to, canvass. I've had a wonderful time door knocking all of my neighbors, whether it's in Campbell Park or in Tropical Shores. That's sort of the beauty of living here. And I also think doing equity work is the realization that most people are just trying to not only survive, but thrive.
Right.
Not to,
No, it's true. It's true.
Yeah. And I also think it's a really great opportunity to highlight, some of the amazing assets in our community. I think a lot of times we like to talk about the deficits in our community, but we actually have a lot of assets. And in places that people don't think, I get people all the time that are like, do you feel safe, canvassing in 13th Street Heights? Yeah. I live across the street.
Right.
And for the most part, I mean, you've got families that live there.
Right.
If you think that it's unsafe, then it should bother you that there are families that are living in unsafe neighborhoods.
Right. That there are kids going
exactly.
to, right, yes.
Exactly. So to me, that's an opportunity to have a conversation and call that person in to say, hey, I know that there's a stigma around, South St. Pete. I am not a person that says I'm colorblind. I'm not. I see the world as it is, and I think you have to in order to address the things that are going on, right? And part of that is also sitting down and saying, hey, we may not look the same. We may come from different walks of life, but we all want to make sure that our families are thriving, that our kids can go to good schools, that people have access to good jobs. I don't think that, your demographic status, determines whether or not you want those things. Everybody wants those things, right? We may all disagree on how to get those things. Most of us, depending on those demographics, probably have different access and to opportunity, and have maybe started at different points in their life where they can more easily get access to higher paying jobs or whatever.
But that's the difference between equality and equity,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And so to me, the way I navigate that is by listening and being curious. I certainly don't have all the answers. And I think even my training as a researcher really helps me in this, because I can say I have a hypothesis about why XYZ is happening in our community. But I'm curious to hear what other people think. I'm curious to hear from the people that live in that community to tell me why they think those things are happening, to hear their stories, because that's only going to better inform and get us closer to the root causes of why these things are happening. And that's what makes me, in my mind, a better advocate, because sure, I might think that all of the assumptions I might have on how to solve a problem are based on my own lived experience.
Right.
But that's just one lived experience. And so if I want to really try and understand it from a more comprehensive viewpoint, I need to ask people what's going on. And that's the beauty of doing door knocking. That's the beauty of going to neighborhood meetings. That's the beauty of just being involved in civic life, right? Is that you can have access to these stories, and you can build relationships with people to allow them the space to be honest with you about those things, right?
I think that's such an amazing way that you have positioned yourself.
Thanks.
Because you are in the community. I mean, that's how you and I got to know each other, because we're
Yeah.
both everywhere all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Across many different circles and
Sure.
modes, and for-profit, not-for-profit. I mean, entrepreneurship, growth, all of those things. We've crossed paths. But
Yep.
but anyone who knows you knows that you are in the community and that
Yeah.
you do ask questions. And I think it's such an amazing differentiator for you to use the word advocacy and advocate, which is kind of a different mindset than representation, right?
Yeah.
To say I'm the representative for my district versus I'm here to advocate for the people
Right.
in my district.
Yeah.
And I love that mindset as a hopeful politician, representative, person in our city who's charging forward and keeping us in check. I mean,
Yeah.
we need those voices to keep
Yeah.
us in check
Yeah.
as the city grows.
Yeah.
And I was so pleased to hear that you're running for public office.
Thank you so much.
I love it. So, any last words on St. Petersburg, nonprofits, wealth, community, public health, politics, city government, state government? I know we could talk for
my
about
gosh.
1,000 hours.
I was
but
just going to say, I would just say that, man, there's a lot of stuff to
I
cover.
know, parting words of
Yeah.
wisdom. So how about we narrow it down?
Sure.
Let's say, let's talk about Hypatia. Let's
Sure.
say, so as the ARPA funding is sort of sunsetting here, what's next for the work that you've done? What do you hope to see the lasting effects of the work that Hypatia has done?
Well, my hope is that we get a few of our nonprofits into a place where they can pay for those services, or they have the ability to utilize resources to continue to pay for our service packages. I also really hope we actually have a pilot that we're launching in Hillsborough County with United Way, which is really exciting. It's a very small pilot, but one of the things that we've recognized is that this model would most likely work best at a regional level, right? And we've seen a lot more collaborative funding models happening in other communities because of this need for, basically funding nonprofits to keep their doors open.
Right.
I was talking to you earlier before we started recording about the we are really at an inflection point in the nonprofit sector. Many of us are feeling, I think, kind of despondent because of the state of things. We're seeing, record levels of government funding being cut, even nonprofits being threatened by our federal government in keeping their 501c3 status based on the work that they do. We've had to switch our language around the kind of equity work that we do, right? So as those billions of dollars are being redirected into other things, the nonprofit sector has turned to private philanthropy to say, hey, help. We really need help. And there has been discordance in what nonprofits need and what funders think nonprofits need, right? This is not new. This has always been something that has been a friction point in our sector. But this has really, I think, put a huge spotlight on it. And as funders in the past have really moved towards, trust-based philanthropy and really trying to center nonprofits in the conversation about how their resources should be used, now we're having to even ask the further question of, hey, what if all of the government funding was gone?
Right.
How can philanthropy use the fraction of what they have compared to what's gone from the government to help nonprofits? There is no way that the amount of money that is in the philanthropic sector will ever replace the amount of money that the government provides nonprofits.
Right. And
it's
that's
not
terrifying.
And it is terrifying. And it's not meant to, right?
Right.
It's not meant to. Like, philosophically, it's not meant to.
Right.
So,
but that's kind of where we've gotten.
Right.
And it is a source of reliance, and especially when our arts organizations lost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I think it was even close to $1 million in promised funding.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It shone a light on, okay, maybe this is a time to start rethinking your funding models.
Yes.
And maybe assume that money isn't going to be there in perpetuity.
Right. And there's been a lot of emergency funding, calls for more unrestricted funding to nonprofits. And for us, our pitch really to funders is the highest and best use of your dollars are to help keep those nonprofits open. It's also to help them strategize ways to pivot because, again, you're not going to be able to replace the amount of funding that's needed for programs. But the thing that both funders and nonprofits can agree on is that they need capacity building in this dire time of need for those very reasons, right? Because if we are going to rethink how we fund nonprofits or how nonprofits diversify their revenue, it's going to take expertise that many of these nonprofits don't have. And it's also going to take investment and truly trust from our philanthropic sector to give that to nonprofits, right? And I will say too, ideally, yes, the government should be able to provide services to its constituents. That is what I believe, right? I believe that the reason why we pay taxes is because the government has a duty to provide base services to its populace, right? And the philanthropic sector was created, honestly, as a means for, robber barons to get to basically quell any sort of labor movement during the Industrial Revolution, to be like, oh, no, we're investing millions of dollars into building Carnegie libraries. Please don't revolt against us. And now it's been codified in our tax system as a way to, help nonprofits not pay taxes, as well as really rich people also not pay taxes and put money elsewhere. So in that, if we think about it from that perspective, which probably sounds kind of radical, but there's actually a really great through-line episode about the creation of the nonprofit sector. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is well documented. Anyway, so in my mind, again, because we are at this inflection point, in the nonprofit sector, we are having to kind of really think about sort of our origin story and what that means now during a time where we have extreme wealth gaps.
Yeah.
And, should we allow a very small percentage of our population that has an enormous amount of wealth determine, what pet projects they want to work on in the nonprofit sector? Or, do we pay taxes and have our government, which is ideally representative of all people, allocate those resources as needed based on the needs of their constituency? And I think that is a larger conversation is an uncomfortable conversation.
It is. You thought talking about sex was uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's really cutting at the coat, right?
Softball.
So wrapping it up,
Sure.
how can Thrive help? How has Thrive helped? How can we continue to help across the board? How can we help connect the professionals we have here with the nonprofit organizations who need that support? How can we support Linsey Grove for city council person?
Sure.
How can we support some of the continuing collaboration and community building in St. Pete?
Oh, great question. Well, I will say we've been really fortunate to have multiple members be a part of our collaborative network at Hypatia. So Big C and some other folks have been, they've been vendors. They work with our nonprofits, which is really awesome. And so I would always say, hey, if you're interested in working with nonprofits, please consider becoming a part of our collaborative network. Essentially, once there is a vetting process, that's a value add that Hypatia offers our nonprofits, is that we do all the vetting work for you. You're not just going to meet with a random business professional. Like, we've done our homework to make sure that the folks that you're working with understand your mission and do truly want to work with nonprofits. And I would also say that a lot of business professionals are great board members. We need folks to sit on these boards because they have connections to networks that our nonprofits don't. And also, our nonprofits need different types of board members, right? That with different skill sets. Many of them have working boards. I think,
and young people.
Young people.
Yes, we need young people on our nonprofit boards.
Yes.
All right, so this is my other idea.
Okay.
And what did you call it? Nonprofit Con.
Yeah, we don't have to call it that, but it makes it.
But yes, we all know what we're talking about. So in addition to that, and this was something I tried, but I wasn't able to get off the ground, but still interested in having an information session for people interested in sitting on a nonprofit board and having a matchmaking service. Hey, we need someone who lives in one of those high-rise condos who wants to be on our board. We need someone under 25. We need and kind of provide matchmaking. So I can see that's one way that Thrive could also be of service.
Yeah, and I think even, hosting our nonprofits here as a part of our monthly cohort mixers has been great. They've been able to see the space. They've been able to meet up with other nonprofits as well as the professional service providers they work with, because most of the time, a lot of it's like either on Zoom or whatever.
Right.
And that's been really great. I would also say, too, that, maybe, I don't know. I'm always struggling with how to get people engaged, right? Because I think COVID gave us all a little bit of agoraphobia or something. Like, we're all a little bit like, I could just stay home tonight. I don't have to go out, But I really truly believe that community is medicine. Like,
it is.
When you're feeling bad about, gestures vaguely towards our existence.
Right.
Being in community really helps ground you. It really helps you reconnect. It's like the kids say, touch grass.
Yes. It's true.
So,
I have people tell me that all the time.
Yeah.
They show up in tears and say, I haven't left my house in 3 weeks. I haven't talked to a human being face to face in probably a month.
Yeah.
And giving people that opportunity.
Yeah.
To engage with each other, but also to just kind of see a different version of what St. Pete is and what it means and how to give back to this incredible place we love. It's important.
Yeah. Maybe you could do like a community co-work day where it's like, today it's free or reduced price.
I love that.
And then anybody can show up, hang out, I don't know. I'm just thinking about, because like physically being with each other, I think is really important. And I also think barriers to entry is something to really think about as well.
That's why I've always kept my co-working
Yeah.
prices really, really affordable.
Of course, yeah. And you're in a good location. Like, I mean, we've been really fortunate. PCF is one of our funders, and so it's really nice to have Pinellas Community Foundation here as well if we want to meet with them. Obviously, the city hall is right next door, so we can meet with, it's really easy to meet with them as well. But I don't know. Like, I think it kind of goes back to I did a certification in social marketing. It's like behavior change marketing. It's not social media marketing. So please don't ask me to do your social media. But I think about, like, there's like 3 things that people want in order for you to get them to do something. It has to be fun, easy. Was it fun, easy, and popular?
Ooh.
So when I think about how do I motivate people to want to do something, I think about what are the things that make it fun, easy, and popular. And then I also think about what are the reasons why people don't do it. And then I try to, like, navigate.
Are there
from
3
there.
easy things?
No, I just, like, we used to do what's called doer, non-doer interviews. So we'd ask people who are already engaging in the behavior, why do you do it? Like, what is what motivates you? And then we ask people that don't do it,
right?
Why don't you do it? And
right.
So if you know why people don't do it, you can then start looking at barriers to entry, like all of these other things. And then, also tapping into the things that motivate people to engage in the behavior. We actually used that model for when we did Democracy Starts at Home during COVID. The League created an entire social marketing campaign that was all about getting low voter turnout districts, specifically in South St. Pete, to just register for vote by mail and return their ballot. And that was what we did. We used a social marketing framework for that. It was really successful too.
Oh, Linsey, you're such a gem.
Oh,
I could talk to you forever.
I know, same.
Please come back
and
continue talking to us. And we're really looking forward to as campaign season really starts escalating, giving all candidates a place to talk and connect with the people here.
Yep.
And I'm just so grateful you're here. I hope in whatever capacity the future brings that we always have a Linsey here.
I know. Yeah. I love bringing people here. They're always like, wow, this is like, wow, you're really cool if you work here. Or, so I'm like, oh,
Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really very proud to be a member of Thrive. So thank you so much.
Oh.
Yay. Awesome.